This is Mike Acerra with Thinking with Mike, and my special guest is Tabitha Yaffe. And this is a really special show for me because Tabitha is the wife of a dear friend of mine, and I discovered that she has a really interesting story. So I want you all to know about it. And so, why don't we just get started with Tabitha? Tell us about you.
Okay, well, let's see. I was born in 1973, so that makes me old, in San Luis Obispo, California, which for people outside of that area, it's on the central coast of California. So it's a small college town, and that influenced a lot of my growing up in that area. As far as the person that I saw myself as being when I was younger, is I'm a California person. I'm the first and only girl in about 6 generations on my dad's side of the family, so that can tell you the kind of doting that happened upon me when I was a younger child. I grew up with a mom who owned a ballet studio, so danced a lot as a young person. My dad was a corporate executive with Frito-Lay for 36 years. We kind of moved down the coast over the years, me and my family and my older brother, and ended up in Orange County until I was probably about 32 or so. Married my first husband right out of college, and my initial plan was to stay in the corporate world. I started working in financial services right out of college. I had been a sociology major with a concentration in applied statistical research. So I started working in like new products, little bit of financial analysis, that kind of thing, and then ended up moving into the snack food industry. Thanks, Dad, for the hookup with Nabisco. So I worked in new product development, basically using statistical models to determine if new product would sell based on sales of prior products. And honestly, I really loved that life. I had my first son at 26 with my first husband, and my second one came along when I was 29. And by the time I was 30, I was a divorced single mom with 2 young kids living with my parents. And that was a really difficult situation, and one that kind of led me back to my childhood of seeking understanding of my world through worshiping the Lord, back to church. I was not raised in a Christian household, but one of my very good friends, who's probably watching right now, Carrie, her dad was a pastor of the local church, and they invited me and to Vacation Bible School. And so, sorry to circle back here, but I accepted Christ into my heart as my personal savior at age 7, got baptized when I was, I think, about 12. But as a lot of young adults do, I had fallen away from my faith in teenagerhood, young adults. I was having a really good time partying, especially Southern California, 80s and 90s. There was a lot going on. It was fun. But I quickly settled down when I got married at 23 and, worked on my career, had my son, bought a house, all of that. So the experience of being back in my parents' home with 2 little kids, having escaped an abusive marriage, and fighting through the court system was very humbling. So at that time, I began going back to church. Went to a very large church in Orange County, which some people are familiar with, called Saddleback Church. A pastor named Rick Warren, who's written a lot of books and kind of out there in the media, was the main pastor of that church, the lead pastor. And through a small group there, I met my husband, Stephen, who at that time was enlisting in the National Guard and had a civilian career. And neither one of us was looking for anybody else at all. Wasn't concerned about getting married, wasn't thinking about it, just wanted to get my life back on track and take care of my kids. And he walked into my Bible study, and that was it. I just knew he was the one, and he knew I was the one too. After probably 2 dates, we actually bonded over discussing Maslow's hierarchy of need.
No way.
Yeah. So he was the first guy that I felt like I could discuss my love of the Beastie Boys and talk about deep theological subjects and Buckminster Fuller and sculpture and art and just really deep intellectual stuff in the Bible and the Beastie Boys all in one date.
That sounds like Steve to me.
It's totally Steve. Yeah. And I just love that about him. he's my Renaissance guy. So we got married, and we kind of in quick succession had 6 more kids. So basically
you said 6, right? You said six.
Yeah. 6 more kids. So now we are a family of 10. My oldest son, Ethan, is 21. He is a rising senior at Columbia University, and he is studying German language and culture, and will probably enter a master's program or a PhD over in Berlin when he's done. He's currently right now in New York City, living the life, doing intern and research work for the German department there, and just living in Hell's Kitchen in a really tiny apartment over a Pakistani restaurant, and happy clam. It smells like curry. You could do worse in life.
The best restaurants, I think, in New York are in Hell's Kitchen. Great restaurants. I mean,
oh, absolutely. Yeah, I didn't get to eat at that place when I dropped him off there, but I was like, oh, it smells amazing, Ethan. Next time I come see you, I have to get me some food. So Adam, my second son, is living with his father in Southern California. He is going to be entering UC Riverside in the fall as a geology major, and he wants to go into oil and gas exploration, which is a great career field. I've got a story to tell about him. So he's a really great kid. He's got severe ADHD, and is twice exceptional because he's also intellectually gifted. So some of the things we went through with him when he was younger really informed my parenting, and it helped me to become very sensitive to what other people go through with their kids as well. So, and then I have Aaron, who is my first son with Stephen, and he is going to be 15 next month. He is also a Renaissance guy like his dad. He's a star defenseman on the lacrosse team. He's a straight A student. He is a terrific guitar player. He's got a real heart for Christ. Terrific with his sisters. Loves to cook. Loves to garden. Makes his own sourdough starter. You know, just a great kid. Got Henry, who's about to be a black belt in Taekwondo. He is 13, and he is just and dry sense of humor, really fun, smart kid. Also has severe ADHD with an intellectual giftedness component to that too. So keeping him engaged in homeschool has been a lot of fun, actually, because he's my one that will plan a project or a trip at a moment's notice, and always has something new that he wants to do. So that's great. I've got Jonah, who's my Lux engineer,
right, and
he's made some great creations for you. He's got an engineer's mind. He's 10, wry sense of humor, another Taekwondo lacrosse kid. Just a fun, smart, solid, self-motivated, really awesome kid. I've got Timmy, who's my wild boy. He's 8. He is everybody's friend, gives the best hugs. Another one with ADHD. So I've got 3 of those. And really smart, loves to build, another Lux lover, except he makes a lot of guns. In fact, I think he had a couple that he wanted to show you. So, and he, really musically talented, great with the Taekwondo, great with the piano. Then I had Hannah, my first girl. So lucky number 7 was our first girl. She was we didn't find out until she was born. So she was a gender surprise. She also surprised us with some health conditions and Down syndrome. So raising her, so far she's 6, has been a great adventure, but I've had some wonderful mentoring on that. She's been reading since she was 3. She now reads at a 2nd grade level. She's super bright, super funny, great sense of humor, just a total love bug, and gives the best marshmallow hugs ever. And then my youngest is little Miss Rachel, is 5. And she's a little curly girl, very talented musically, art, dance, everybody's friend, just a super sweet girl, really bright, learning how to spell some pretty complicated words right now, and one that also really enjoys adventures in life and likes to go out and do projects, and is working on her own garden. So I think that's a good intro. I'll say that we have also, as a military family, lived all over the United States. I've lived overseas in Germany. We're right now on the East Coast in Maryland. And now that my kids are all a little older and I've got some time, I've been feeling that nudge to start giving back to my community, whatever that is. It's all over the country, all over the world. Moms who need mentorship, who have things that they want to express to others, who feel a deep calling to be home with their kids and to find fulfillment in marriage and children and maybe leave the corporate world. Those are my people. Women of faith, women without faith, women who are raising children with complex special needs, women who are raising kids with behavioral special needs, women who have suffered through abusive marriages and, maybe have some complex traumas from that are getting in the way of their personal happiness and their parenting and finding joy in that. I just kind of want to be there for everybody. And so I've started writing, sharing more about my family and my journey, and hopefully sharing some encouragement too, and wanting to partner with people, wanting to come alongside you, and so we can support each other. And so I'm started just a little Instagram page, and it's I believe it's in my bio, I'm not sure how you're sharing that, but it's just Gen X Christian Mom. And I will be starting a blog pretty soon with some longer form writing on there as well. So
right.
I think that's a good start.
It is a good start. And I told you before, I feel a little humbled talking to you because just to unpack what you just said, obviously you're proof that men and women's brains are different, because
yes,
I asked you about yourself and your life, and it was just all about other people almost the whole time. And really well said about other people in your life. And it wasn't just like mommy pride, but though that was there, but kind of a sense of these are beautiful people. And I kept getting a sense of, wow, this woman has a really full, rich life. And it wasn't like, I wasn't going to be one of those kind of women. It's my choice, my body kind of women. There's nothing of that in you at all. It's just, you found a life that's so rich and so involved in other people and in your family and your children, and your husband, that that's what's really interesting to me. That's why I call this episode American Woman, because you kind of are an ambassador in a sense. There's a lot of pressure on you, but you're kind of an ambassador of a person who's lived a rich, full life. You're not judgmental. You really are about healing and nurturing, and about opening yourself up to any other kind of people. Like your tribe isn't just other homeschool moms or just Christian moms or just army wives. It seems like you were just kind of open. Is that a fair assessment?
Oh, you're so sweet, Mike. That's a really nice. I feel really warm hearing that. That's very sweet. Thank you. I like to think that I'm that kind of person, because I've certainly had my share of my beliefs and how do I want to say, my journey through life. I have been through many different phases. I've worn many different hats. Mm-hmm. I've been that working mom. I have been a single mom. I have been wild and crazy late teen, early 20s person who went to all the hip hop clubs in downtown LA and was lucky I didn't get carjacked on the way home. I have been those people. I have been a person who doubted my faith. I have been a person who sat the fence on choice issues. And I just feel like I'm authentically myself now. Right. And I know that my journey is only mine and it's nobody else's. And I don't want to judge what other people have gone through or where their hearts are right now. Because I think that every single person on this earth has something to give, and we can all learn from each other. I can learn from a 20-year-old who's having her first baby as much as I can learn from a 65, 70-year-old grandma who's raised her family and sent them out into the world and has grandchildren and great grandchildren too. And I can learn from dads. I can learn from people who've never had children. I can learn from people who, anybody.
What would your 20-year-old self say to you now? If she didn't know it was her, but she's looked at you. What would your 20-year-old self think about you?
You're crazy. Why do you want so many children? I think my 20-year-old self would look at me and think I had it together pretty well. She'd be happy that I was in a good marriage, that I had found love, because that was one of those things that I think I always had like this Hallmark movie, romance novel view of what marriage was going to look like. And, I think that my 20-year-old self would look at me with my husband and think I'd done pretty well. But she'd probably be astonished by how many kids I had and that I never went back to work after number 3.
Yeah, 8 kids.
Yeah.
I've had friends who are they're German, and when they were living, and they've homeschooled, and they immigrated to America, and they were ministers. But when they're living in Germany, they would get a lot of dirty looks
Oh,
when
yes. Oh,
because
yes.
The Germans did not. I think more so than they would get here, but the
Oh, yeah.
Germans seem to really be against that idea.
Well, and their culture is very different. Like we would go places in Germany and people would just stare at us and count the kids.
Yeah.
And I remember going to an amusement park, and this woman just wouldn't stop staring at me. So I started giving her dirty looks because I didn't know what else to do at that point, and I was pregnant and hormonal, anyways.
Right.
But that somehow, the idea of publicly condemning somebody for having a lot of kids was okay. Sorry, I have a kiddo here who needs to go. Can I talk? No, you may not. Thank you. Sorry.
Okay.
He was at a sleepover last night, and I think he's a little punchy. So anyways, yes, you're right. Germany was absolutely unacceptable. Ironically enough, though, except for those few people we met who were people of faith when we were there. And generally we met them in the hospital, but yeah.
Right.
Otherwise, yeah.
When we homeschooled, if it wasn't for that family who lived down the street,
Yeah.
they were homeschoolers, and it made our homeschooling experience so much richer because of
Yeah.
this German family. And Germans are great. They just were like a little different than most Germans, it seemed like. But
Absolutely.
they told us about this story, and since you had your one child with Down syndrome in Germany, it seemed like a very interesting situation of all countries to have it in. And did they give you any flack at all, or what was their impression of you accepting a child with Down syndrome in Germany?
Well, it kind of went two ways. There were some doctors that had seen me with my husband and the other kids and were like, okay, they've got it together.
Right.
And they're going to be fine. And this baby is blessed to be in this family.
Right.
So that was good. There was a cardiologist that we saw who basically told us we should consider sending her to a foreign country for adoption, and or leaving her in the hospital until every single procedure she ever could need possibly was done, because there's no way we could take care of her. And was very physically dismissive the way that she touched our daughter. I felt offended, as though she touched her as though she wasn't human.
Right.
And in general, I would say I felt like I had to hide my daughter when we were there. She was in an infant carrier. She was, so a sling or front pack. I didn't want people to look at her, to touch her or anything like that, because you could feel the weight of the disapproval.
Right. That must have been really hard.
It was. We couldn't get back to the States fast enough.
Right. And I was following you on Facebook at that time. And I remember it was like procedure 24, procedure, whatever. It seemed like it was like dozens of procedures, but these were like heart surgeries. These are major, major operations, right?
Abdominals. Yeah.
Oh,
She had colostomy a day after she was born.
Oh my goodness.
She had a procedure to drain, because she was born without an anus. So had to get it out somehow, right?
She was born without what?
An anus. So she had no way to pass stool.
Oh, okay.
It's a condition called imperfect anus, and it's not just people with Down syndrome who have it. Mm-hmm. They say it's actually like 1 out of every 5,000 births is a person with an imperfect anus, so no anus, and that takes on different forms. That's been our main health issue for her at this point. I mean, when she was born, the lymph fluid, which is called chylothorax, that was the biggest one, because that was occluding her heart and her lungs, making it difficult to breathe.
Right.
But she got really lucky because a lot of people with Down syndrome are born with, in fact, about 50% are born with serious heart defects, and she didn't have any of that.
Okay.
So that was good. Mm-hmm. Heart is good, lungs are in good condition. She's very healthy.
Right.
But one of the best things that we ever did was to find alternative medicine and therapies for her, things that doctors will never tell you about, but definitely through the naturopathic communities, the chiropractic communities, the alternative therapies, that kind of thing. But we've been giving her special supplements since she was old enough to be able to stomach them. We put her in special types of therapies, and she's really thriving. So,
wow.
But that took a lot of research on my part. So again, any of you out there who have kids with Down syndrome, get in touch with me if you have questions. I'd be happy to
Yeah.
pass along my
And
knowledge.
that's just one experience that stymies,
Yeah.
let alone having 8 kids, but just having that in your life. And I was telling you beforehand, I feel before I spoke to you, kind of like I wanted to think about some things that I feel like I'm I think everybody has this, but there's certain aspects of our life that we feel like we're imperfect, or we're like there are
Oh,
areas that we
absolutely.
should have worked on. And I grew up in a
Mhm.
in a house where in our backyard, which is a 75-bed nursing home my parents built.
That's
And
amazing.
every time it was a great experience. To me, that was my normal, right? But every
Yeah.
time I went over there, all of the old people wanted to like hold us, had talk to us, pull us in, fawn over us. The smells weren't quite right of the urine, and it just I had this terror, kind of a terror of the infirm and the weak, and I didn't get over it, and I told you later on, I mean, if I saw a child with Down syndrome, or some child was trying to play with Lux blocks who had webbed hands and really couldn't, I felt horrible. And I was like, is this feeling natural? Is this embarrassment natural? Is this something I should really fix because I don't like it in myself? And
Yeah.
so anyways, I want to tell you about it because I feel like maybe that is a normal state for most people. They try to organize their life to avoid these uncomfortable
Yes.
situations, right? So I'm going to bring that up.
Absolutely. No, and I can't say that I'm any different. They say something that, sometimes there's this saying like, well, people with, children with special needs are born to special mothers. No,
Right.
really, kids with special needs are born to regular old everyday people
Right.
who decide to take it on. And I can't say, like, I'll say this: when we had our fifth son, there were some soft markers on his ultrasound that indicated that he might be born with Down syndrome. He does not have Down syndrome,
Mhm.
but I had to get myself ready quick and in a hurry for what that might mean. And for me, as a person who is pro-life, that definitely there was no hint of termination. But I'd be lying if I, said that I didn't have misgivings about trying to raise him ourselves. And this is in an intact household with um, dedicated parents
Right.
and good structure, income, not a problem, health insurance through the military, not a problem. I just try to imagine what people who are in more dire circumstances might have felt, knowing that this might be their life, that you might have a perpetual toddlers, for lack of a better way to put it, because at the time I didn't really have an understanding about what raising somebody with lifelong developmental disability would actually look like.
Right.
So I felt like the Lord was actually kind of working on my heart to get me ready for what would happen when I actually did have a child with a developmental disability. And I did have to confront some things that I didn't like about myself,
Mhm.
that I wasn't, I was very proud of the academic and intellectual achievements of my children.
Right.
That's, I had my oldest son taught himself to read when he was 2. He's always been highly, highly gifted in the language arts areas, especially, but certainly math wasn't far behind. And this is a kid who was 40 points from a perfect score on his SAT without really trying. That level of achievement is what I wanted for all of my kids. And it forced me to kind of come to terms with the prideful issues that I had in my heart about what success actually meant. And was I really loving my children unconditionally, or was I basking in their accomplishments without really addressing who they are, and loving them for the beautiful creation that they are, that had nothing to do with me. And
Mm.
so it forced me to get a lot deeper into my parenting journey. I'll say that, that I had to really come to terms with, as much as I love my children, am I loving them the right way? Am I accepting them for who they are? Do I acknowledge their fears, their hopes, their ambitions? Am I letting them live for themselves? Am I treating them like the gift that they are because they don't belong to me? And so um, I think I think it's really important that you acknowledge that those things had made you uncomfortable, and that, perhaps some of it had to do with, like you said, growing up in with the nursing home behind you, because you weren't necessarily seeing those lovely grandparent types in the best of circumstances. They're maybe health issues or dementia. They smelled funny. Um, and it made you uncomfortable. And that's a normal human way to feel in those circumstances.
But I did get to witness my parents' compassion for them.
Absolutely.
My dad yelled at the dietitian. And my dad was good at yelling, an older Italian guy himself.
Yep,
And
yep.
because he saw this guy's name was Joe something. He was an Italian guy, right? And he said, Joe, what's wrong? The guy was crying. He was in a wheelchair crying. And he had something in front of him, some kind of like meal or something. And he said, oh, he had spaghetti in front of him. He had spaghetti. And he said, they won't let me put salt or sauce on my spaghetti because there's salt in it.
Oh,
and my dad went to the kitchen. This is an old Italian guy sitting there, right? And he wanted some spaghetti sauce on his spaghetti. How many days does he have to live? But the dietitian said no salt for him. So my dad just railed, and I watched my dad do that, just rail on this dietitian, like he's going to get spaghetti anytime he wants it with sauce. But I saw that a lot, even though I was uncomfortable as a kid and felt bad about it. I think that I'm thinking about your kids now, growing up in your household. Yeah, sure. There's more to life than being a great lacrosse player and getting A's and F. And to see how you and Stephen are treating your child and loving her, and she's a loving child, you're raising them in a kind of a whole, full human environment. So like you said, these are blessings, and I can't see that this is not going to make your kids better. I mean, I can't believe it's not making it better.
Well, and I think that's one of the important lessons about integrating people with differences into our society as a whole. If your children aren't in, say, a classroom situation or at church or activities with people who are different, whether it be, delays, autism, physical differences, whatever it is, as kids, how do we expect them to be able to relate to people with disabilities in the community as they get older? And we want the idea of somebody like my daughter, Hannah, to be normative, that Hannah participates in everything that you do, so that later on when Hannah wants a job and Hannah's working at the bakery or Hannah's working at a restaurant or, pet facility or whatever it is, that it's not, oh, we're being charitable to give Hannah a job. It's like, why wouldn't we give Hannah a job? Hannah belongs in our society. Hannah's a part of us. Hannah's not, a charity case. Hannah is,
and Hannah's a stitch. I mean, you guys love the hell out of her. I mean, I've been watching you guys, and you post about her a lot, and she's gorgeous. And
thank you.
And so it's like, again, it's the full life. It's not like you're not faking it to make it. You're showing us how this human being is actually a delight. We don't look at her the same exact way we look at our kids, but we don't look at any of our kids the same as other kids, right? Like you said, they all came out different.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And that's been half the fun, honestly. It's just, I mean, it's a joy at every stage, but when one of our kids comes to us and they've got an interest or a talent, you see them figuring things out. And so kind of backing up a little bit, Stephen and I had the opportunity to go to Parents' Day at the Taekwondo studio this past week. So our 3 kids who are participating in Taekwondo right now had us in their class. And so everybody had a parent there. And just to see, to experience what they do in their classes each day, and I had such an appreciation for their physicality and the mind control and all of the discipline that goes into being able to perform Taekwondo at a high level. But just that I had such an appreciation, more even than just watching from the sidelines all the time, but being able to physically do it myself. It's like, wow, that's a lot of work. Mm-hmm. And it's not just, it engages everything from the top all the way to the bottom. And I'm really proud of my kids for being able to do this, every week, 3 times a week. And I think they were surprised at how much Stephen and I could do too. So it was such a nice moment of mutual appreciation and being able to interact, not on necessarily a parent-child level, but on a classmate level that, is really special to me. So as far as Hannah goes, yes, we definitely, we understand that she's going to have differences, and especially her little sister's been asking a lot of questions about why Hannah's different. And, trying to explain chromosomes to a 5-year-old is a little difficult, but her brothers actually are the ones that have chimed in and said, well, Hannah's body is different, but, and her mind works differently, but see how many cool things she can do, and, how much fun we have with Hannah. Let's just go with that. She doesn't have to be like you or do the things that you do. And Rachel accepts it. Yeah. And
she has delight. And I think most kids relate to delight, and to see that joy and the laughter. And she
always has a playmate, at the park or, in the neighborhood. People love Hannah. and especially my adult friends are like, Hannah's really a cool person.
Yeah.
And I love that because she's her own unique person. She's not a stereotype of, oh, people with Down syndrome are always happy. No, they're not.
Right. No.
But I'll tell you what, every day is a new day for her. She does not hold a grudge. She does not hold on to anger. She moves on quickly. She is happy to see you every time I come home from even going to the grocery store. It's like I've been gone for a million years. The hugs are enormous. She's just a love, if you're having a bad day, that's the person you need to go see.
I think that
go hang out with Hannah.
Hannah is almost like a metaphor for something else I want to talk about, and that's that the full life is a life that's going to pull out of you the depths of your heart you didn't know existed, right? That kids freak you out because they give you so much love, and you just at first you're like, it's like Joe Rogan said, it's an intoxicating drug, but because you don't feel like you deserve it, they're just giving you so much love and trust. But to have 8 kids, oh my God. And so, but it's not just a love of like, oh, I'm so loved by my kids, da, da, da. It's also, they tear at you, right? They tear at your heartstrings, and you worry so much, you care so much. It pulls you into a larger, like pulling on dough. It's stretching into a larger human being, and you're laid raw. And so, and it's hard to explain that to somebody who doesn't have kids, who's thinking about how to plan their life when they're 18. They don't know this about their heart, right? So I think it's interesting that you've achieved emotional depths and stretching that probably a lot of people haven't achieved. It's interesting to me.
Oh, well, I appreciate that. I'll say that especially having Hannah, well, and I'm going to backtrack a little bit because I had my 3 with ADHD before her.
Right.
Having to come up with creative ways to be a positive disciplinarian, to acknowledge their needs and where they're at, and be able to deal with the meltdowns, the running away, the high energy explosiveness sometimes, and not
feel sorry for them. You can't feel sorry for them.
Feel sorry for them, but really to be able to meet them where they're at,
right,
is hard.
Yeah,
really hard. And I'll say that those experiences kind of helped me build up the calluses I needed to be able to work with Hannah, because those kids didn't have other types of cognitive differences like she does. Thankfully, she doesn't have ADHD too. That would be kind of difficult. But there are plenty of kids out there now who, kids with Down syndrome, who are getting autism diagnoses too. And that's a whole different ball of wax, I'm thinking. But, being able to find creative ways to parent my kids positively all the way through, not to be punitive or inconsistent, other ways that I feel are destructive to your relationship with your children, and lead to a lot of instability and behavior issues as they get older. That takes a lot of creativity. And I know you know this as a parent, being able to take each one of your individual kids, figure out where they're at, and then take that and find out what they need is really, that's where, like we were saying before the show started, that you can take parenting as surface as you want or as deep as you want. And, it's all about, for me at least, is I'm willing to take it as deep as I have to make my family in our home a harmonious place. That,
Well, it's funny, you mentioned Taekwondo, and which is an external system with its own social order and history and tradition, which is amazing. And Heather and I, we struggled with that in the beginning because we had these 2 beautiful boys. They're 3.5 years apart. They came out differently, but we wanted to give them experiences we didn't have. And oftentimes those experiences involve things, not Taekwondo necessarily, but like Suzuki music, where you have a mentor relationship with the teacher. Luke started when he was 3 playing cello. And the teacher, Mrs. Suda, was someone he was probably closer to than his aunts and uncles, because he saw her every week since he was 3.
Yeah.
Right. And there's a whole, in classical music, there's a whole tradition of bowing, which seems kind of oriental, and lots of respect and lots of love, but also lots of discipline. And then we moved on to scouting and then the Young Marines, because Heather and I said, there's something about the military culture that's so interesting because of the manners and the personal discipline that's involved in holding yourself with your chest out, your arms back, speaking in a sounding out. Speaking not in a mumble, but in So we would we'd literally teach these kids how to sound off and pretend like your brother or sister is across the lake, isn't like drowning, and the only people who could save them are across the lake. How would you carry your voice? We had to teach kids
Yes.
how to open their voice up, but that's training
From the
right?
diaphragm.
Yeah, from the diaphragm. So we were involved in like how to teach kids how to shake a hand properly, how to say yes, ma'am, and no, sir. And people thought we were crazy to expose kids to military culture, Marine Corps culture. But we're like, it's not about teaching them how to kill. Don't you think that Americans kind of largely misunderstand military culture? What do you think about that?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. No, I agree with you, especially thinking about how many people have voluntarily served. Because that's what we're talking about here, is that by and large, I mean, granted, our parents' generation was baby boomer. They might have been conscripted into service in Vietnam or something, but beyond that, how many have voluntarily chosen to serve?
Right.
Not many. We're talking what, 3 to 5% of our population has some sort of relationship to the military, whether it be family or themselves. So yes, there's a huge misunderstanding. The concept of boot camp, when you think about it, is to tear you down, to build you back up into the mold of the person that they need you to be. Well, that person is somebody who uses eye contact, gives respect to all, who stands up straight, has physical fitness and physical bearing, and has confidence. Are those bad things? No, those are all good, positive things.
And they have instilled delayed gratification.
Absolutely.
Because it doesn't feel good. Nothing in boot camp feels good. It's all
absolutely not. Nope. You could talk to Stephen about his experiences as a 30-plus-year-old in boot camp, and that makes it even worse because you're not, a young buck either. It doesn't feel good. And also think about delayed gratification this way. You could be a subject expert in whatever you did before you came into the military, but you could still start as a private. You're still going to have to give respect to people who might be younger than you, who might know less than you, but because they have come up through the military structure, they are in a position of authority. We deal with a lot of that.
I had a friend who went to architecture school, became an architect after he transferred away from Knox. So he was an older graduate. He was a legitimate architect, and he decided after 9/11 to serve. And he wanted to serve in military intelligence in the Air Force. But there were no slots open. So they said, well, just join as an airman for an airman, which is non-commissioned. You're an enlisted person, A1, right, or whatever it is. And so, but then when the slot opens up, we'll make you a second lieutenant. So here's a guy who was a professional architect, right, who's a grunt. But they still put him in a team with other intel people. And he's working with majors and captains and generals. But these specialized teams all had a lateral respect for each other because they were technicians, right? And so the military, I think, understands that too. That like sometimes you might not be the same rank as me, but we're at a level where we have to perform as a team. So it's like a professionalism. It's interesting how they do it in the military.
Oh, totally. And that definitely happened for my husband as well. They saw that, hey, this is a guy with a master's degree, and he's an artist, and he's got all kinds of business experience, real world experience. He's a people person. This guy's a leader. So let's make him a leader even before his rank says he's a leader. So, and even now he's in a position where he works with, admirals, generals, definitely much higher ranking people, but they have respect for him because he gets the job done.
Right.
And he's a subject matter expert, and he, he's a creative thinker. He's very bright, and he's committed to what he's doing. So he's not just your average cookie cutter West Point guy. He's got a story to tell.
Yeah. So a lot of people see, you talk about your Christianity, right?
Yes.
And you also talk about your Army wife. And some people would say, well, you're just a woman who gives herself up to her husband, and you're there to support your Why isn't that a negative thing? I mean, in our culture, it seems like that would be a negative thing, that you're a person, you should have had your own life. Tell us why that's been, what's your interpretation of that?
I understand. I understand why people would think that that's a negative. You see me, with a bunch of kids at a park, and, or maybe you see me on Facebook, maybe you know me in real life, whatever it is. And I could see where maybe people think it's negative, or that this wasn't my choice, or that maybe I'm in a situation where I'm not choosing to have so many kids, but it was chosen for me, for lack of a better way to put it. I want people to know that, and I know this is not for everybody, But for me and for a good number of women out there, there's nothing more fulfilling for me than to be in this support role of wife and mom. And it's not to say that I never wanted anything for myself, but um, ultimately, as a Christian, I'm taught to give up myself, to want less of me and more of Christ. And for me, my mission is at home. This is my mission field right here. So I feel like I'm giving the ultimate service to be raising future adults, members of society, people who are going to be out there giving themselves because they've seen that as the example that my husband and I have shown them that a life of service is a good thing. He's giving in service to his country. I'm giving in service to my family. That that I find fulfillment in this, and that it's okay to not have a corporate career for myself. Hey, I've been a single mom juggling job and kids, and I've been a working mom even in a marriage and doing the same. And that was not fulfilling in the least. If anything, I felt every day that I wasn't giving enough to my employer and I wasn't giving enough to my family.
Right.
You know,
right.
And that I know every day when I wake up 24/7, this is my job. And even if I have an off day or a day where I'm feeling depressed or whatever it is, that this is my labor to my family is my gift to the Lord. So I'm treating every day as a gift to him. This is my choice.
Right.
Yeah.
You told me, you said you see your children's gifts, that your sacrifice is a privilege, and that you never would paint a picture for your kids that look at what I've given up for you. That that's never been what it's about. No. That it's a joy and a gift from God to you to do this.
Yes.
And that's an interesting way of putting it. And it doesn't and there's no guile or bullshit here. There's no like, this is a kind of a propaganda. You really mean it, don't you?
I do. I've seen enough of life in my 47 years on this earth to know that this is the best thing I could ever do with my life. It really is. And to give my family any less than my best is to not be fulfilling my mission on this earth. Really, that's just all there is to it for me. And again, I understand that this isn't for everybody. I know that my mom never would have chosen this for herself. She had me and my brother, and that was it. That's all she wanted. And she wanted to run her ballet studio and have her life and her career. And I don't begrudge her that at all. That's just what was right for her. But what I want is for every woman, every person who is in a parenting role to be able to find that joy, to, whether you're a stay-at-home mom with a bunch of kids like I am, homeschooling and, managing a household with lots of needs. If you're a mom of one, it doesn't matter. But to understand that the parenting part of it is a gift to you. The children are a gift, that it's not a burden, that it's not a have to. It's I want to find joy in this. I want to be fulfilled in this role, whatever that looks like to you. And so for me, being a working parent wasn't fulfilling anybody. It wasn't fulfilling me, my kids, or my employer. But that's me. So not everybody,
it seems like our culture, just from looking on Google, just Google motherhood, right? And we were talking about this, how it's just a dirty shame that there's so much crap that comes up. These little bromides, these Hallmark cards. It's a real superficial, silly, dumb, kind of little thing you put on your wall, kind of bromides about motherhood, when it seems like it's one of the most deep subjects, not only in biology, but like in anthropology. It's a deep subject. I'm a Catholic, and you're a Christian. Mary is that she just took this mantle, this burden of and it's like, so motherhood just fits into all aspects of our spiritual life, our biological life. It's like the big subject, and it seems like our culture is falling down. We still don't know how to even think about motherhood. It seems to me. Maybe I'm wrong.
No, I completely get what you're saying. I think the way that we see family structure changes so rapidly. Certainly things look different than they did even 10 years ago. As far as how we view parenting, what a family structure looks like, what is expected of moms and dads. And I think that's what's hard, is that there's so many expectations that um, you wouldn't want to be somebody like me, maybe, or maybe you would want to be somebody like me. And if you're not like me, then that's the problem. That, I should want a career, or maybe I shouldn't want a career. Maybe why are we basing our economic um, structure on a two-parent working household?
Right.
Why is our birth rate falling? Um, what do all these things mean? Gosh, it's hard. I mean, this is something that I think about a lot. And I know for me, again, talking about my mission field being at home, I feel like the best thing I can do is just be me.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah.
When we were doing Suzuki, we go to these camps, right? And lots
Mhm.
of stereotypes played out. But
Oh yeah,
one interesting stereotype we
the
saw was,
overachievers.
yeah,
That's
and
right.
one stereotype we found that was interesting was a lot of the parents of the kids were
Yes.
professors, and they were old parents.
Yes.
Like
Yes.
really like noticeably old parents. Sometimes
Yeah.
they oftentimes adopted. It was often maybe an Asian child, but a lot of times they had their own kid. But it's like they got to a certain point in their life, and you could tell they said, "Hey, we let's get a kid." Like they felt incomplete, you know.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting, and I think the values coming out of academia, and I don't want to get political or anything, but I think the
No.
values coming out of academia are probably pretty much, it's focus on your career. A family is something maybe down the road, but a family of 8 children,
Yes.
forget it. That's crazy, you know, like that's
Oh
never.
yeah.
So, but it seems like people find maybe in their life an emptiness without a kid, and which only
Oh
makes
yeah.
sense to me. But so yeah, that was one of the stereotypes we saw, was these older people who decided, let's get a kid. We got to get a kid. There's something, it's going to be good for our marriage. It's going to be good for us, and maybe it's something we need at a deeper level we never imagined.
Sure. Sure. And that's a great thing to decide that, hey, I'm ready to move on with my life and give life to another, whether it be through adoption or your own birth or whatever it is. um, it's funny you should mention that, because we talked about my oldest son being at Columbia, and you
Right.
can imagine that's a real pressure cooker of an academic environment. And when I dropped him off for his first day at his freshman orientation, and just talking to people on campus, we were so far outside the norm of anything that they had seen before, that you could tell that they were surprised that my husband and I could speak intellectually on any subject, that
Mhm.
I could put together a sentence, even, that we, were there with our daughter with Down syndrome and all these other kids. And um, but then yet you saw this admiration too. Like, that's really tough, but they managed to get their kid to Columbia. They must be doing something right. They all seem happy together. They're not fighting like I'm fighting over, a Prada bag with my spouse or whatever. Or, that mom let her son arrange his room the way he wanted, instead of me over here micromanaging my daughter's carpet placement in her dorm room for 3 hours. And not kidding, we saw that kind of stuff. Um, but there was like this begrudging admiration that maybe we're doing something right.
Right, right. And I think there's something about the world. If you do go on the internet and go on social media, it
Yeah.
seems like there's a very strange worldview that a child could develop, because there's a lot of
Yeah.
artificial, like we spoke before about narcissism.
Oh yes.
That's been a subject in
Mhm.
your life, I know. Um,
Yeah.
but you see
It's
this,
okay.
it's narcissism on parade on Instagram, it seems like,
Oh
and
yeah.
people will pay to have jets pull up just to get their picture taken boarding a private jet, but they didn't get on, but just so they could have this lifestyle. So it seems like a
It's
very,
hilarious. Yeah.
yeah, ostentatious. But I wanted to talk to you a little bit about one of the cliches about Christianity is that there's a patriarchal wanting to control a woman's body, right?
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
but I think most people, even if they're the most virulent anti-Christian types, do see that there might be a problem with 7, 8, 9-year-old girls or older with no modesty, and they
Yeah.
might be naively presenting themselves in a way, not unknowingly, right? That is
Yes.
making them kind of fodder for people with really unsavory desires. So what's
Mhm.
your view about that? Because no one
Oh yeah.
wants to say that your kid looks like a little slut on Instagram, but but the little girls are doing a TikTok dance. All they're doing is a TikTok. It's so innocent,
But
But
those TikTok dances are sometimes a little suggestive too. I
but the
mean,
kid, and
yeah,
the 7-year-olds may not know that, the 12-year-olds may not know that. But so it
sure.
seems like the world is pulling our girls into a direction, it seems, to most people, to be questionable.
Oh, absolutely.
How do you deal with that?
Um, I think it's really important for children to have bodily autonomy from a very young age,
Mhm,
to understand that their body belongs to them and to no one else.
mhm,
That, I might need to check on something, or your dad might, or a doctor, but otherwise, you do not let anybody touch you in a way that you don't like. And I think that there's this kind of a subtle grooming that happens from a very early age. And I say this as a former dancer. Um, you show up in class in a leotard, and people touch you in places that would not normally be appropriate to touch: inner thighs, pelvis,
mhm.
rear end, that kind of thing. And you become desensitized to that and think that it's okay for people to touch you there because they have been touching you there. And there's not that separation between this is okay in this context and it's not okay here.
Yeah, it reminds me of that U.S. gymnastics team situation, right?
Yeah, and that
Yeah.
was so by the way, that happened. The Nasser
Mhm.
situation happened in mid-Michigan at Michigan State University, and that was about 5 miles from our house.
Right.
We were living in Lansing area then,
Mhm, mhm.
and we knew people. We know people who were involved. One of the young women who was a member of our church, another one who's a grown woman with 4 kids. Her son happened to play lacrosse on my husband's team, and her husband was the choir director at the high school. It's a small town. People knew people there that had
Right.
been involved in this. And I had talked to them a little bit about this because, um, as a former dancer, I even said, as a gymnast, you get used to being touched in a certain way, right?
Mhm.
Where the idea of this guy taking a few extra steps to touch you in other places didn't seem that far off the mark. I mean, am I, without trying to trigger you, am I, seeing this kind of the way it was?
Mhm.
And they were like, yes, you are, because it's a slippery slope. You accept this, so you're more willing to accept this down the road.
Right.
You start here with these suggestive TikTok dances at age 7, and maybe you're going to be more willing to accept a boy touching you in ways that it's not comfortable for you at age 12, and worse as you get older. And so I think for us, we try to be protective of our kids without being exclusionary. I mean, we teach them about proper anatomy. We teach them about what spots are good, and it's okay for people to touch you. Hugs are good. Don't let anybody touch your butt. Try to make it funny and fun for them, but that, you know
Mhm.
what, you are a unique and wonderful and special person, and to dress modestly and to keep your body for yourself shows a level of pride in who you are. It's not about being a prude or being overly modest or whatever, but I mean, granted, I'm a 40-plus-year-old woman, and I don't think anybody wants to see me in skimpy booty shorts. Let's just be honest here, right? Um, but even if I had the body for that, I would not show my body that way, because that's not showing that I have any pride in who I am. It's showing that I define myself by exterior sexiness, or what our society deems as sexy, rather than being, a well-dressed woman who carries herself with some dignity. And I'm not trying to down women who dress that way, or slut shame, or whatever you want to say, but
Right. Right.
it's important to me that we understand that being able to, dress in a way that's flattering to you and appropriate, and not wear booty shorts on TikTok doing dances when you're 7, shows that you have a level of pride in who you are, and that you're confident in what you have to offer the world. Just you, not your appearance, not what's on the outside, but what's on the inside that really matters.
Right. Okay. One more subject that I feel like I can get in trouble talking about, but
It's okay. I'm
so
good.
I was raised Catholic. I left the
Yeah.
church for a while as a young
Yeah.
man. I moved in the forest, in the woods. I was in the art community, or mostly with atheists, right? Because the arts
Yes.
tend to be very that way, and left leaning. And then
Yes.
later in life, it was really, for me, it was 2000. It was 2000 and the attack on 9/11 that
Yeah.
really got me thinking about things. And then my wife I married my wife in a Protestant church. She was Protestant. She became a Catholic. And then
Mhm.
I said, maybe I should really rethink myself. And so my life got a little smaller in a sense. I felt like, I'm going to die.
Yes.
I'm mortal. I'm going to die.
Yes.
And I never hated my church. I never hated God. It wasn't that. It was just, I
Yeah.
left it. So I came back, but I still have, and I have lots of friends who are evangelical and open Bible church people and Christians,
Mhm.
non-church Christians, there's all kinds, right?
Absolutely.
But I always found myself having kind of a, not an aversion necessarily, but when people bring up like Christ, I accepted Christ as my personal savior, and
Yes.
they use Jesus Christ as kind of a magic word,
Mhm.
like that's enough. I always felt like uh, not that I want to disassociate, that's not it, but I felt
Yeah.
with that, but I felt kind of an allergic a mild allergic reaction, that there's something
Sure.
about that that doesn't seem right to me. It seems harder than that. Not that Catholicism is the only way or Christianity is the
Oh
only
yeah.
way, but I felt like
Sure.
when I look at you, I think here's someone who's really, to use a cliche, walking the walk. You've walked through fire.
Yeah.
You have the full life, and you're joyful. And it seems like when you talk about Jesus, I'm like, yeah, well, she's kind of earned it, man. She's obviously she's living the life, right? What do you say?
Yeah.
So
I understand.
that's like being uncomfortable on people with handicaps, being uncomfortable with that. It's one of
Sure.
those things I'm working with, because I don't ever want to see people abuse faith to manipulate. And at the same
Yeah.
time, I don't want to see a world without faith where where God people are loathed and dejected. So it's like, I feel that both, you know what I'm saying?
Oh, absolutely. Well, and I think it's important to get through this. You hear a lot about, well, they're pushing this religion down my throat kind of
Right.
business, right?
Yeah.
Um, I want to be able to be one of those people who can talk about Christ in my walk while still being inclusive, if that makes any sense.
It does.
Because like you said, I have been through a lot in my life, and I've come to this position authentically. I explored Buddhism, and certainly was agnostic for a while and unchurched. But I came back to this because it makes sense to me. It works for me.
Right.
I truly feel like, because there's a verse that says faith without works is dead. So I kind of think that's part of what you're getting at too, that in Catholicism, your works are very important, what you do. And certainly
it's both. It's both.
It is absolutely. And it should be. And that's one of I think that a lot of the better evangelical churches, like I belong to a non-denominational church, and it is all about loving on each other.
Mm-hmm.
That we accept and love each other as we are, because we're all Christ's creation, Lord's creation, unique and beautiful and wonderful as we are. We don't get into politics. We don't talk about gay marriage. We don't talk about trans issues. It doesn't matter because that's a God thing, that the Lord will decide how to deal with those things. We're here to love and to be his hands and his feet. And we're not going to be his hands and his feet if we're only serving people that look like us, that think like us, that vote like us, that mow their lawns.
I think people miss out on that a lot, is that the love thing, right?
Yes.
That what really makes the whole thing so rich is that if you say, I really could let myself freaking hate you, but I'm not going to, it's an act of volition. I'm going to choose to love you, and I'm not going to bring up these subjects that will cause us to divide and yell at each other, because why bother? Why bother, right? I'm not going to convince you, and I don't want to convince you, and you don't want to be convinced. So why not choose just to love each other? And it's not a dumb thing. It's actually just it's a very liberating thing, I think.
Oh, absolutely. I saw, going back to meme culture here, social media, but I did see something that I thought was very valuable, where a person, basically it was a meme, I think, but the idea was that you're going to lose friendships over two guys that will never see you, not know your name, not even really know you exist, meaning the presidential candidates, right?
Right.
Why would you do that? Why would you lose relationships over something that ultimately is so unimportant?
Right.
I mean, granted, our worldviews are important, but who I voted for, who you voted for, who my brother voted for, who the guy down the street voted for, in the end, doesn't matter. They're going to be in office for as many years as they're in office. It might suck, it might not, but then they're going to leave, and we still have to go on with our lives. And I'll tell you what, I'm not going to lose friendships over that subject, or over politics,
right?
Because it's superficial. It's an immediate issue, but it does not have eternal consequences. But not
Yeah.
loving our neighbors as ourselves, that has eternal consequences.
It really does. And there's a Catholic social teaching called subsidiarity, which is
Hmm.
a fascinating concept. And it basically means that power is best left in the lowest possible, smallest denomination possible. So a
Oh yeah.
family, a community, a church, a school, like that's where people should be mostly expressing their political speech. And
Yes.
because you have to face, you have to look at your neighbor in the eye
Oh
and
yeah.
talk. But when it becomes
Absolutely.
a federal sport,
Sure.
it becomes very, for one thing, you don't have much to say, like you said, and it becomes
Yeah.
like a really weird, violent team sport where you dehumanize each other. And I think that's really not productive.
It's not. No, you're absolutely right. Because, like you said, you're not going to convince anybody, anyways.
No. Right.
I do my best to not share anything political, ever on any kind of platform. I can talk about those subjects with, like you said, face to face or,
Right.
conversation. I'll talk to my mom and dad about it, or my brother, or, my husband, or a friend, or whatever. But I, in the end, I need to have that accountability. And I think everybody does. That if you're just behind a screen and you're attacking somebody or, demeaning them, there's not a level of decency that you have to be a part of a community, that,
Exactly. Right.
yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
exactly. Like I couldn't, blast you to your face. It's just not going to work because I might have to see you, at the grocery store next week, or maybe you're my son's teacher, or, any of that kind of thing. So you do have to treat each other. You're forced to treat each other with a level of respect and consideration because you are in a relationship, like it or not. And like you said, I reserve the right to maybe hate you silently, but I have to live with you in community. And
Going
so,
back,
yeah,
right.
yeah,
Well, going back to community, I'm going to go back to the military for a second. My dad would say, and he
yeah,
wasn't a practicing Catholic. He was
yeah.
excommunicated because technically because he divorced his first wife, but
Oh,
he always said he insisted on two things. He wanted us to baptize our children because he was old
yeah,
school, and he also said there's no atheists in the foxhole. He fought in
yes.
World War II in the Philippines in the Battle of Leyte Gulf. He saw a lot
Oh,
of horrible things in war,
yes.
and but he did believe in God, but he also felt like and he didn't talk about this, but something about that generation. They were the
Yes.
Archie Bunker generation, well, the
Yes. Yes.
generation we'd like to call like the big bigots and the racists. But
Oh,
he had,
yeah.
and when you heard them speak, they spoke in racial terms, in pejorative
Mhm.
terms. When I grew up, the
Yeah.
first question you asked in Chicago was, "What are you?"
Yes.
Irish, Italian, whatever. And there was a pejorative term to go with that. But at the same time, my dad's best friend was Jewish, and he mostly hung out with his black friend Willie. So
Mhm.
it was all mixed. These guys
Yeah.
all fought in the war together. They had a kind of unspoken respect for each other.
Brotherhood. Mhm.
And I think that's lost. There's so much lost right now on how Americans really do love each other, how we get along
Yeah.
with each other just fine, but we get hung up on how we speak about things sometimes, or
Sure.
we ascribe the worst possible motivations when in fact that's not how it's playing out. So what do you think about that?
Oh, totally. No, I completely get it. And that's one area where, again, the military is a great microcosm
Yeah.
of what society could be because, there's people of all different walks of life here, all different racial backgrounds, ethnic backgrounds, religions, whatever it is. But, we're going to have to fight together. So we got to get along together. And the
Right.
same thing while the service members off fighting, the spouses are going to be back here holding down the fort. And we've got to get along because we need each other. We
Yeah.
do. And just as those soldiers, airmen, Marines, those guys all need each other too. So if we aren't figuring out ways to get along with each other and to be in community with each other, then number one, your experience is going to be pretty miserable. And number two, you might die. So
Right. Right.
you've got to figure this out. You got to figure out how to live with other people. And yes, there is that kind of unspoken brotherhood, like, hey, I was in Balad, or, I was in Kandahar, whatever it is. And, oh, yeah, I was there with so and so. Oh, yeah, I know that guy. Oh, yeah, that was a bad fight. Whatever it was. But those guys have that, like you said, the brotherhood, this sense of shared experience that does bind us together. And when you're talking about how Americans really do love each other, I was thinking about an example that I saw just on a Facebook community page for the town that we lived in back in Michigan. This woman said that the township had tagged her house because nobody mowed the lawn in a couple of weeks. Well, as it turns out, she had 11-week-old twins. She almost died during their birth. Her husband was trying really hard to hold it together, And so she was advertising for somebody to come cut their lawn. Well, 88 people responded to either go cut her lawn for free, bring her meals, help her with the laundry. You know, you get the idea here, right?
I do.
That and she responded later on that all these people came out of the woodwork to help her, and you know, just to be neighborly and to love on each other again. And some of that I think is the Midwest, because as you know, as a Midwesterner, people are just like that out in the Midwest. Like, I can't tell you the number of times that people just unprompted helped me with things when I was in Michigan. One of the reasons I fell in love with that area. But
Yeah. Well,
yeah,
I think,
yeah, that people want to be helpful to others. It's a natural human, you know, we know that we need each other, right? You think
it
about
is.
like
It is
in the
natural.
hunter-gatherer days, you would not survive if you were there by yourself. You had to be in a tribal community with others to share the care and share the food, share whatever it is, the labor. So we have to be in community with each other, and we have to love on each other, because we're what we have. You know, again, this is my way of showing myself as Christ's hands and feet. But there's so much practicality in the Bible when you come to think about it. You know, yes, we're here to fulfill the Great Commission and to bring others to Christ and to the Lord, and to eventually end up in heaven. That's our belief structure. But we can't get there by talking. It's got to be by doing. And people way back then, they knew that they had to be in community or they wouldn't survive.
Yeah. I think we are hardwired to be
And
heroes.
I think we've lost that in a lot of ways, you know, isolated behind our screens.
Yeah.
Yeah, we are.
Yeah.
And to want to save the day. And I know I feel that way all the time. Like, I mean, you know, when I broke my ankle a couple of years ago, black ice, and I was just thrilled. I mean, same little town, but people came out of the woodwork to help us. And I was thinking, one person said, well, you're always the first person to sign up for a meal train or to offer to watch somebody's kids or give somebody a ride. Why wouldn't we want to help you? And I thought, oh, I guess people notice. Great. But I'm not doing it for that reason. I'm doing it because it's the right thing to do.
There were two movies that just came out
Yeah.
that kind of reminded me of Frank Capra, because I'm a big Frank Capra fan, and you don't see many movies like
Frank Capra.
You don't see many movies like Frank Capra anymore. But there are two movies that came out recently that our family rewatched like right away, and it was Hillbilly Elegy, and it was Nomadland.
I love Nomadland. That was a great movie.
Yeah. Did you see
the other one?
Oh, the other one's
no,
good.
but I thought that was on Hulu, I think. So I'll see. I want to check that out.
They're almost like a really interesting double feature, because they both portray, one's Ron Howard, who's a big filmmaker, and the other one's another woman, a Chinese woman who's not as big a filmmaker, but they in a different kind of treatment. But both show a part of society that hardly ever gets treated on in movies.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, but it reminded me a little bit of Capra in the sense that here you're seeing everyday folks, right, in a kind of with a loving camera. But it's not a propaganda camera. It's not like a silly Hollywood view of life. These are people they seem real and genuine and community minded and almost heroic in the sense of how they love each other and we're all in this together kind of thing. So I would recommend it to anybody if they want to have a great double feature. Watch those two new movies, because it seems like maybe Hollywood's starting to pick up on that. We need to make movies that are about deeper values than just blowing things up all the time, maybe.
Oh, totally. Or, you know, for lack of a better way to put it, liberal talking points. And, you know, I say that as somebody who considers herself fairly centrist, but
right.
One of the things I loved so much about Nomadland is that there was such a respectful treatment of the real life people that the main characters came across, that, you know, they weren't just, you know, weirdos who couldn't do any better than to live in a trailer, but, you know, people who had life stories and you know, who maybe been through some traumas. You know, there was one gentleman that was talking about when his son committed suicide, you know, or other people who had serious health issues and couldn't support themselves otherwise. And that's real, and that's America, and that's your neighbors. And those are, you know, people who are deserving of our respect and care, not just to be dismissed. And I think kind of like I felt hidden in my life in some ways, because I think I fit a stereotype of, you know, what some people think of as a submissive Christian quiverful type of woman is. I think that people in those life circumstances, and you're talking about the hillbilly elegy, I'm assuming West Virginia. I mean, I don't know for sure.
Kentucky and Ohio.
Kentucky. Okay, yeah, Rust Belt. those are some amazing areas and really awesome people too, having been through those states. And I think one of the things I love about movies like that are treating those subjects and the areas that they live in it with respect, is that people get a sense that there's actually a world outside of New York and California,
Right.
or wherever they grew up. And I'll say this as a native Californian, a lot of people in Southern California don't think anything exists outside of Southern California.
And you could hardly
So,
blame them, because it's a freaking paradise. I mean, I've been there,
oh
and it's
yeah.
absolutely gorgeous.
I'll say this though, but the times that I've gone back to visit, or had to deal with family court and things like that,
Mhm.
I wouldn't go back there to live. I
Mhm.
never would. After having been all over the country and through the world with my husband and our life, it's expensive, it's
Yeah.
crowded, it's smoggy. It's all about what you look like, what you have, what you drive, how much money you make, and it's just a big rat race now. Traffic is 3 times worse than it was when I left in 2006, and
Mhm.
Los Angeles just looks like a pit. So it's my
I did
mom and dad ended up, yeah, go ahead.
no, say what your mom and dad did. Go ahead.
They left 2013, I think it was, yeah, to when my dad retired from Frito-Lay. They left and went to North Texas suburbs, like how many other countless Californians,
Right.
right now are moving to the North Dallas area, to Austin. A lot of people moving to Colorado and places like that, because
It's an
um,
exodus. It really is.
it is, because what California used to be is not what it is now. I wouldn't raise children there. I mean, Northern California, Central California, different, obviously, but it's too expensive. You can't have the kind of family life that you'd want. And one of the reasons why we really love living in Michigan is you could actually have a life there. You could work a normal job and live near a lake and go hang out with your kids on a boat. You could go skiing in the North Country there. You could go to beautiful Lake Michigan. You could drive 5 miles and hit water. You can have a great, beautiful outdoor lifestyle, and you could probably afford to have a stay-at-home parent for your kids and have a little land too. And you live a simple life that, with the people and ideas that matter to you.
Yeah, and I think we should celebrate simple lives more often, because
Absolutely.
there's a great wisdom in that.
Yes.
Because as a kid, what I remember most is not the presents I got from my
No.
parents, but it's that there was a creek behind our house.
Oh
And,
yeah.
and that creek was a source of amazing joy for me. It kind of gave me a
Sure.
trajectory
It's
my
good
whole
stuff.
life. It
Yeah.
is great stuff. Yeah. Kids
Absolutely.
kids don't need that much.
No, I mean, I grew up in a college town, and it was an ag school, so they had like this, there were always cows and horses out there. My dad happened to work there for a while, so we would go out there and just hang out with the animals, and you could go get ice cream at this really cool dairy store they had there,
Mhm.
and going to the beach. Just that, yeah, I don't care about the stuff. It didn't matter to me what kind of cars my parents drove, or that we lived in a fancy house or any of that. But that there were those outdoor life experiences, and that we could kind of get in trouble on our own, and it was not a big deal. They weren't super protected, and just the idea, like you were talking about that creek, and I know Stephen had similar experiences when he would go visit his cousins in
Mhm.
rural Missouri, that you could have some pretty cool life experiences, and none of it had to be expensive or complicated, or this
Yeah, our
show.
culture,
It didn't have to be a show. Yeah.
American culture is kind of addicted to the new, right? The new
Yes.
shiny object, the new,
Oh,
the
absolutely.
or the, there's,
Mhm.
and but I think conservatism, what it mostly best means is that we try to preserve the good, right?
Oh yeah.
It's not about supporting Republicans. That's not what conservatism is about, or controlling other people's reproductive process. It's
No,
mostly
no.
about trying to identify what's good and what should be permanent, and what's extraneous. It's
Yeah.
like almost like a thought process. It's not a
Sure.
judgmental process of like, I hate liberals, I'm a conservative. I don't think that's it.
No.
I think it's
Mm-mm.
confused. And I grew up mostly a liberal, because I felt like
Oh yeah, me too. Mhm.
liberalism means that you love, and that you're generous, and you're open to new things.
Sure.
And I
Or
think
so you
that
would think. Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I feel like I'm kind of a conservative liberal, in a strange sense, because we should be open-minded, and we should be
Oh yeah.
protective of what's good, right?
Oh yeah, no, that's exactly right. I know that like my brother, for example, grew up, he was very, very liberal when we were younger. We both were
Mhm.
pretty liberal, but he's
Right.
kind of flipped all the way over to being a libertarian. And he used to really like listening to Rush Limbaugh, which nobody, you know, that's not the thing you do in coastal California. So he's
Right.
lost a few friends that way. Um, but yes, you're right that preserving what is good, and that can be open spaces and
Mhm.
clean air, clean water. Those are all things that we should want to conserve, right? And that's something that most liberals would agree with.
Right.
Um, but also that we can support family structures that are beneficial to our children, and
Mhm.
um, this idea that somehow families like mine are a problem, that simply because I exist and go to church and raise my children as Christians, that I'm transphobic or homophobic or a bigot or racist, or because the color of my skin or whatever it is. It just compartmentalizes people so much.
Mhm.
And I like to think that conservative is more of a big tent, that, like you said, preserving the good. So you could be whoever you are, but um, that we want to hold on to institutions and ideas that are central to who we are as an American, who we are
Right.
as America, as the
And
United
it's
States.
right. And it's more complicated being binary because
Oh yeah,
like like you brought up nature and ecology, but that's where there's a
yeah,
huge crossover, right? And
yes,
I think it's a huge crossover in terms of law and order. I think that no one wants their city to burn, right? It's
no,
just, but they want, I think there's forces that want to pit us against each other and say cops are
yes,
evil, cops are good, I'm pro cop, I'm anti cop. It's such a
no,
stupid conversation. It really is, because a lot of
it
these
is
people,
absolutely,
we have cops in our family. I mean, and they'll tell you, they'll be the
yeah.
first to tell you there's nothing worse than a bad cop, So life is nuanced. And I think, like you said, if we love each other, a lot of this stuff can settle itself out in the community amongst each other. Right.
Absolutely. But we have to not be afraid. And I
Right.
think people are afraid of each other right now.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm not going to lie. I mean, I would have a hard time approaching a random person on the street. I'm a little bit of an introvert, believe it or not.
Right.
Um, but I'll tell you what, like I run into all different kinds of people just through my daughter's medical care. So we go
Mhm.
to Children's Hospital National in Washington, D.C. Big hospital. People come from all over the region, all over, you know, some, the specialist that my daughter sees was the originator of the surgery she's had. So people travel from other countries to come there. And it's Washington, D.C. anyways, right? So kind of a melting pot. And we had a 10-day hospital stay not that long ago in November. And I came into contact with so many different kinds of people through that stay, just who were there with their children, who were working there, who had different life situations, and the kind of conversations and the depth of experience that people come to that hospital with their children or themselves or their careers or their lives is just so remarkable. And if I wasn't open to that, I mean, I think about how much I would miss out on in my life simply by not being open to other people who might look different or sound different or have a different way of being than me, who might have grown up in a different way, live in a
Yeah.
different,
You could you could
yeah.
use the metaphor of blinders, and it's literally they're blinders.
Oh yeah,
Blinders. And if you could look at the metaphor that when you wake up in the morning, you open your eyes, all that's a learning gift. It's a gift from God or
yeah.
whoever you want to say it's from. But everything you see that day, you can learn from. And if you decide to turn away from people because they technically they don't pass your litmus test, and you won't listen to them, or you're just putting blinders on, you're missing that gift. It seems like.
Oh, absolutely. And that's one thing definitely living in a military lifestyle will teach you very quickly.
Right.
Because if you do put on those blinders, you're going to be alone and probably in some kind of difficult circumstance that your spouse can't get you out of, and no one. So you have
Right.
to make friends. You have to
Right.
do it.
Right.
You have to get to know your neighbors. And in doing so, I mean, Germany was really hard. I'm not going to lie. Most people who go to Germany who are Americans in the service love Germany. It's the best education ever. We loved certain parts about it, but it's really difficult to go over there with a lot of kids.
What
And
made
then
it
of course to
difficult?
have our daughter. Well, it's just not, German society, Europe in general, Western Europe is not made for people with big families.
Mhm.
The streets are narrow. There's no place to park your big old van with all your kids in it. It's expensive. Houses are small. I'm sorry, I am an American through and through, and I like my air conditioning. There's no air conditioning over there. And I know that's a little thing. The way the healthcare system is very different. I'm not saying it's better or worse, but it's just very different. And if you're not, I'll admit to not really being open to the way that things were done over there in terms of healthcare. It's much more Spartan than what I was used to. And I was also used to kind of calling the shots more than they allow you to do over there. So that was tough for me to not feel like I was in charge of my own care. And then when you get the layer of, okay, so I'm an American living on an American military base with American rules, and then there's German rules that I have to follow as well. It can be really hard,
Right.
to not just be completely overwhelmed with it. But we lived in what they call a stairwell unit. So it's just basically a walk up, 6 apartments, all of us with 4+ kids or more, and husbands of similar rank, that kind of thing. Those are my best friends. And as much as Germany was hard, if we had never gone over there, I mean, hopefully maybe Megan, Katie, and Chelsea, you guys are watching, or Kelly, Emily. I love you guys. They got us through Hannah hospitalization and her birth. We were there for each other when our kids were sick and the husbands are out of town. We would have barbecues for every holiday down in our courtyard. We just made lifelong friends. And we were lucky enough to have a couple of them go to Michigan at the same time that we did. And so we were able to kind of stay in contact. And, our kids are lifelong friends. It's just amazing. So, but again, if I wasn't open to them because maybe they grew up differently than I did, or, had different careers, different values, whatever it is, different faith, where would I be?
Right.
My life is richer for this, just like my life is richer for raising the kids that I have. And I know we touched a little bit about, choice issues, and kind of coming back to that. As a person who is pro-life, I don't have any interest in changing legislation. What I want is a world, and I know this is utopian, but where the idea of somebody terminating a pregnancy because there's no support, because the father doesn't want the baby or whatever the reason is no longer a factor, because we're all there to support these women in having a baby, whatever happens after that, and support her and the child as a family, not just you popped out a baby and that's the end of it. But again, because we're a community, because we love each other, because we accept each other, warts and all, because I'm a sinner and so are you. And my sin doesn't make me better or worse than anybody else. I'm just the same.
Right. It's like that. It reminds me of Job. Was it Job? Yeah, it's Job. When he said, well, what was that in the Bible where the guy said, would you do it this far? Would you go this far? Would you? Is that Job?
That's right. When Job's buddies came in to talk to him about his situation.
Yeah. But so they'll say, well, would you support it at 3 months, 4 months termination, 5 months termination? It becomes like this little game we play, and then but it seems like we're being played. Like they want us to like hate each other. And the pro-life and pro-choice people have to hate each other, and they have to, and it seems like propaganda in a sense, because if we just say no one hates babies, okay, nobody hates mothers, and so let's start from there. Let's all agree we don't hate these people, and so what can we do from here? Yeah, there's got to be common ground, because this is just getting really old, man, where everything's being decided upon,
Well, and to, again, there's that vitriol that comes from plucking away at your keyboard, talking to somebody you don't know and will never meet in your life.
It's so easy.
And, it's a nasty thing to say. I mean, I think about, I every so often I might make a public comment on something. And if I ever mention that I have a child with Down syndrome, there's all these talks about drain on society and blah, blah, blah. You're never going to please everybody anyways, or like you said, people are just not going to agree, and they don't want to be convinced. But you know what? Maybe that same person might meet me in person someday and see who I am and what my family's about and change their mind. But again, that's not going to happen unless they actually meet me and see me. So what's the point of me posting something online about it?
Yeah.
So
right.
It's what we would call a hearts and minds campaign that that coming to a common place of loving each other and finding a way to do that. And to maybe understand where, someone is coming from who's been in that situation of having an unexpected pregnancy. And, there was this was a Rick Warren thing from when we were at church one time. And he said, there might be unintended parents, but God, every baby is intended, is planned for, is wanted. So while you might not have intended to be a parent, your baby is here for a reason. You got pregnant for a reason, whatever that is. And you can let it transform your life in a good way, but it's up to you to do that.
Yeah.
You can have a life full of meaning simply by loving that other person and being their number one fan, so.
Right. And Buckminster Fuller wasn't really a Christian in a sense, but he did talk about God and spirituality in his own way. And he talked about how we're here for a mysterious reason. But but it could be that we're all here because we have at least one great gift to give humanity. It might be a mystery.
Absolutely.
It might be a mystery to the baby, but that baby, through their experience, it's a unique experience, and allowed to be nurtured and grown up. That might be the baby that gives us a new trajectory as a species. So he saw it as a scientific probability that all these babies are here, are maybe our best hopes, not our school system and all of our little ways, but might just be nature trying to help us.
Oh, absolutely. No, that makes sense. I mean, when you think about it this way, that pregnancy termination is a loss of potential, straight up. It may not be a fully formed human being that is no longer able to grow, which is tragic in itself, but who knows? What if that was somebody who had the cure for cancer, or finally united us in some way that we needed, or even smaller, that guy that planted a community garden and brought everybody out in his community to, enjoy the fresh vegetables and fruit. People got to know each other and were healthier as a result. It could be something small, it could be something big.
And saying that doesn't mean that we hate the mother. Saying that doesn't mean that what about the choice of the mother? Well, that's not what we're talking about right now. We're not talking about the mother, but it doesn't have to be one or the other, right?
Well, I'll say that my personal belief is if you choose to have intercourse with a male and you're fertile and so is he, then you choose the consequence that comes from that. And I don't mean that in a negative way, but it's something that I think people need to understand. Oh, well, the birth control failed. Well, birth control can fail sometimes. So you need to be prepared for that consequence of what happens if the birth control fails. You might get pregnant. Are you ready for that? If the answer is no, then maybe you need to think about other types of sexual activity that don't involve penetration. I know that's graphic, but you get what I'm saying there. And that's the lesson that I try to give my kids is that, that you've got to be prepared for the consequences.
Here's a hard one. You think that a lot of people think that there's a lot of kids there that probably shouldn't have been born because they have pretty bad parents. They weren't wanted. And it's just their society's burden that there's whole cities full of these kind of people. And what are we going to do about it? I mean, it's not an illogical thing to look at the world that way and see, yes, these are children who weren't wanted. I taught in public schools where, God bless them, some kids were there because they were there, but they had no parents, or their parents were on drugs and out of their life. And it was like, it's always been a tough call because you have humanity that doesn't really 100% take care of their kids or brings kids in the world that nobody loves. So what do we do?
That is tough. I mean, I live really close to Baltimore, so we hear about it, we see it. I was thinking about a few weeks back, we went to a football game that my son was playing in, and the other school that they were playing is known as like the tough school in the district. And it was a home game for them, and they had half as many parents there as our kids did. And I thought, well, that's because a lot of their parents are not present in their lives.
Right.
Don't care that their kids are out there playing football, which to me, at least, it's like, well, that's a way out of your bad circumstances. A lot of talented kids on that team.
Right.
You want to support that. The hard part is that those kids that grow up in those circumstances could sometimes turn out, with the right mentoring, with the right kind of, determination, can really turn out to have great lives. Right. I think it's important to not judge, where you start and let that determine where you finish. or what your path is going to look like. So I'll give a personal example. We have a really terrific respite care provider who comes to see our daughter Hannah twice a week. She grew up in really terrible circumstances, but this is a girl who's really bright. She always knew she wanted to work with kids. She got herself into university and managed to get scholarships to pay for it. She's going to start a PhD program pretty soon. And, she's working and taking care of herself. And, she said that her mom was largely absent and grandma pretty much raised them. And her mom is still largely absent in her life. And yet this is just a fabulous, fantastic young woman who's got, so much life ahead of her to do great things. And she's already doing great things. And would we want to say that she shouldn't be there because she had crappy parents? That was not in her life.
And
it's
strange. It's strange how we forget that, because my dad grew up in depression, and there's countless stories of people who did great things who had missing parents or were orphans. But we've set the standard so high for ourselves as these middle class new Americans, who, if our kids aren't playing cello and getting A's in math and going to the best camps and getting the best things, then we're somehow horrible parents, and our kids, we're failing our children. And it's like, it's a strange inversion that kids could really. I taught Bosnian and refugee orphans when I was teacher training in Chicago, and these kids looked like they came out of Auschwitz. They were very emaciated. They're still getting nutrition in America. They're still under, but they were the most beautiful, angelic children. And they were so smart and so appreciative. And I said, these kids are going to be okay. So kids, it seems like our culture is strange in how we look at child rearing right now. You know what I mean?
Yes.
But I think you're right. With a little bit of mentoring, some of these kids in these urban areas do wonderful things.
Oh, they absolutely do. They absolutely do. And I'm really grateful for us to have this care provider, to get to know her, because she's a fabulous person, and I'm getting to know a different side of life through knowing her. And that, maybe this is something that I can work on later on in our lives, or maybe one of the kids will want to do as well, is to work with kids in an inner city environment to, help move them along a little bit, or to give them just even that one adult who cares, in their lives, somebody that they can count on. It's really important. I had thought about, we might at some point in the future foster teens or something like that, I think, when the other kids are older. But again, to give just some stability, something, and to see where that goes. I mean, there are plenty of people in the military who came up through sort of similar circumstances and have made fabulous successes of themselves. So, I mean, there are structures in place for people like that. They can really thrive,
Yeah, I was talking to Kirby Erner last week at my show, and we were talking about what an amazing thing it would be to have these outdoor camps for kids. They can go to at least 1 week or 2 weeks in the summer and see what the stars look like, and maybe take care of a horse and ride a horse, or be near running water, and have that peace that you don't necessarily get in the city. But there seems like we could do things collectively and individually that could help solve this problem. It seems like to me, anyways.
Definitely.
We've come to 90 minutes, so I'm gonna
wow,
take.
Wow, that went pretty fast.
It did, and it was an absolute joy to have you here.
Oh, Tabitha. Thank you, Mike.
And
I really
I want you to come back, because we have other subjects that you said that we should talk about, and we didn't touch on today, but I want to get to those too. If people want to contact you, what's the best way to contact you?
Okay, so probably the best way would be through, you can either message me on my Instagram page. That's the, Gen X Christian Mom. At Instagram. You can look me up on Facebook. I'm just Tabitha Ziegler Yaffe, and you'll see my smiling mug on there. I can provide an email address if you prefer to go that way. So that's just my first and last name. So it's tabitha.yaffe@hotmail.com. And again, I'm not looking to sell anything. I don't want a claim. I just want to give something back to people who might be, who I can, how do I want to say? I don't want to have that savior complex or anything. I want to be able to partner with and mentor and support, because I know it's good for both of us, and it's the right thing to do. And I just want to pass on my knowledge. I know a lot. I've been through a lot. I've seen a lot, and I love my fellow humans. And I think it's important that we try to give back to anybody we possibly can.
You do, and it is, and I wanted to share you with my growing little audience here because I think you're kind of what the world needs right now. Are people standing up saying, "I have this valuable experience. I think it could be helpful." So thank you again for being with us. I'm gonna take us off Facebook, and we'll talk a little bit more after Facebook. Okay.
Okay.
So stopping live stream now. Thank you, everybody. I'll see you next week.